Attention everybody, the views expressed on the show are not necessarily those of Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, and or their affiliate and subordinate ministries and or nonprofits. So without any further ado, it's that time again. It's the happy hour with your host, Dr. Paul Collins, and his wife, the lovely Miss Nancy, patience of a saint, wife of Paul. So without any, I already said that, Dr. Paul. Take it away.
All right.
I got mixed up there. I didn't know what I was doing.
That's all right. That's all right. Sometimes I get my words all mixed up, you know. And they used to say when I was a kid, they got their tongue over their eye tooth and couldn't see what they were saying. How about that? Hey, it's Friday. Comes around the same time every week. Believe it or not, it's true. And this is the Happy Hour broadcast with old Dr. Paul and sweet little Miss Nancy.
Oh, Dr. Paul.
That's right, that's right. And sweet little Miss Nancy. And we have a very special guest today. I've known her several years. I won't say many. Well, I'll just be truthful. I've known her many years. And she doesn't show it. I do. Renee Goodwin will be our guest today. Before we get around to Renee, I have to do my usual greetings. Hello, Shirley Simpson. Shirley was my first secretary when I was a pastor in St. Joe. And Shirley and I have been friends for a long time. And Shirley is a beautiful little blonde. And so I have a way of attracting beautiful women. Our medical doctor who was on with us last week, Dr. Jamie Durfee, beautiful little woman. And today our guest is a beautiful little woman. And I married a beautiful little woman. I just have a thing for beautiful little women. Hello, Shirley.
Did you write that book?
No, I'm getting ready to.
Oh, okay.
And want to say hello also to Judy Nickel, way down there in Bryan, Texas, suburb of College Station, home of Texas A&M. And want to say hello to Galen Garrett. She's in the Dallas Metroplex area. And hello to Jerry Chambers in Chesterfield, suburb of St. Louis. Beautiful area. And Jerry was a teenager in my church in St. Joe. He's now a retired school administrator.
Oh, wow. Been
retired for years. And let's see. Up in northeast Missouri, all the folks up there, Lynn Purdy and all those folks, and Janie Wood. And then back up into the St. Joseph area. We have a lot of friends there left over from my days when I was a pastor there and so forth, and people in the Kansas City area, including Dr. Jim and Pam Whining, who are leaders of Acts Ministry. And let's see, Nancy, did I leave anybody out? I know I did. We want to say hello to all the friends in Germany and in France and in South America.
Pakistan.
And Pakistan. And China, to the folks. And by the way, I like to greet my French friends this way. Comment allez-vous? Il est très bonjour aujourd'hui, n'est-ce pas, mes amis?
Oui, oui.
See there?
Get your feet up. It's getting deep in here.
All right. And a good time is being had by all, that's for sure. Anyway, the coronavirus is still lurking around doing its thing, and the American people, we are doing our thing, and most places in the world, they're doing their thing. What was that again, Nancy? How did you? You don't make a very good coronavirus. Oh, my. The little woman is alive today.
Yes, she is.
What happened to my missionary girl? What happened to my preacher girl? All of a sudden, she's a stand-up comedian sitting down. You got it. Well, Matthew Dillon.
I shouldn't be having that kind of power to be able to make sound effects and noises, Dr. Paul.
That's just all right. Matthew Dillon Pearson, and his sidekick is usually here, Jason, that I call him Festus. And I had to explain, there's Festus, he's arriving. I had to explain to him about Gunsmoke because they're that younger generation.
Oh, yeah.
They wouldn't know a good television show if it walked up and sat down beside them. All right, Renee Bless your heart. It has been too long.
Yes,
since
it
you've
has,
been
Dr.
around.
Collins. It has.
It's been too long. As I recall, you probably showed up in Springfield to work for a local TV station, did you not?
I started as a camera operator at Channel 10. That was years and years ago.
Wow.
And then worked my way up to radio, and then got to where we would be doing a roundtable show, on TV and talking about the hot news events of the week. And yeah, I kind of miss media.
I would imagine. Channel 10, if my history serves me right, my memory serves me right, was an offshoot from the one of the oldest, if not the oldest, radio station in town, and Channel 10 is the oldest TV outlet in town.
Yes, it is.
How about that?
They've been around
Where
a
did
long
you-
time.
Where did you come from originally?
Here.
Oh,
I
really?
am a native, born in Virginia, but my parents moved here when I was just about 3 months old. My mom's from here locally, and my dad's from a little town called Clinton, Missouri, up by Kansas City.
Oh, yeah, we know Clinton very well.
Oh, yeah.
Back when Bill Clinton was president and before they changed the highway, I used to tell people to get to Clinton, you had to go through Collins.
You sure do.
Collins, Missouri.
And Deepwater, too.
Yeah. Oh, what a day we're
I
having.
didn't have my finger on the trigger for that one. I did not do that.
You better stay tuned. Did you know that Bill Clinton's real name was William Jefferson Bly III?
Yes.
And his relatives were the reason that we have Blyville, Arkansas, that's named after his original family. And Nancy, we spent a month, a couple of nights in Blyville.
My dad used to go there on the railroad, so
One of the guys that helped us start Acts Ministry many years ago, about 27 years ago coming up now, Nick Nickel, he for some reason, he didn't care about the panhandle of Texas. I just really enjoyed Lubbock. They call it the Cap Rock. You dig down 3 feet and you're at solid rock. Anyway, he said that he spent a month in Lubbock one weekend. But I enjoyed it. Nancy always enjoyed Lubbock, and we have some dear friends out there who are watching and listening. By the way, Mark and Deborah Elvers and all their crew out in Lubbock, Texas, right there on the Cap Rock. And just off the Cap Rock is Ransom Canyon, Texas.
never heard of it. But I've been to Lubbock before.
All right, well, Ransom Canyon is a residential area, and it's in a canyon. It's right off the Cap Rock, and it got its name because way back, as they say now, it's the cool thing to say, back in the day.
Way back in the day.
Way back in the day, Native Americans, otherwise known as Indians, would capture a white person and take them down in the canyon and hold them for ransom.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
it was not so far back in the day that they really meant any harm. I mean, this was their way. They would raise some money that way. It was kind of a good-natured deal. You grab somebody and take him down in Ransom Canyon, hold him for ransom. So that's how it got its name. And
Little history there.
We have some good friends there, Lyle and Darlene Way. And Lyle was and could still, if he wanted to, be an author of Christian novels. And he wrote probably 24, 25 of them. I had the privilege of consulting with him and giving him ideas for 2 of his novels, and he's a great, great writer, great storyteller. Lyle Way. If you get a chance, go online and order some of his books. You'll be glad you did. Yeah. Well, Renee, we got you from, what was it, Virginia, you said?
Yep.
To
Springfield.
Okay, now, by the way, on this show, I call Springfield, my adopted hometown, Springburg, USA.
Springburg, you still call it Springburg.
Springburg, USA. And so you came to Springburg when you were very, very young.
Yes.
And we got you to the TV station.
KTTS was where I kind of made my mark, and, I have a face for radio, so.
No. Strike that last remark. Did you hear what that girl said? Anyway.
But it was, had a privilege of taking part in one of the best news stations on radio in this area, and it was back when news was really news. We didn't have the fake news. You had to verify your sources and do. I think we interviewed you several times for stories for KTTS a long time ago. I think me and Melanie.
I have been interviewed by so many, I just can't remember.
Get your feet up.
But it's media's different now. The way we present things and the journalists, a lot of times they don't like to check facts the way they used to. But I think it's a platform. It's a great platform for people, but some people tend to, not use it very well sometimes.
That's right. That's right. Well, the human factor gets factored in.
Oh, definitely.
And nowadays we're seeing more and more and more of that. Not to get off into biblical areas that some folks may not be ready to walk in, and this show is not about that, even though we're a faith-based organization. It was foretold that we would have a time when man would kind of get in the way of things, and one of the authors, one of the recipients of a letter in the New Testament, was told that there would come a time when men would just really be unreliable. They would have itching ears and all kinds of things going on. Maybe we're that place now where
It seems like it.
Man is really getting in the way of things, and he doesn't do a very good job of taking care of stuff either.
Nope.
That's for sure.
They forget whose hands it's really in. And that's
Now-
the man above.
Now then, dear lady, I remember too, after you left broadcasting, you were on the ground floor of laptop computers
Yes.
because you were an entrepreneur and you were refurbishing laptops, I think, for
Yes.
resale.
Yes, indeed. And that was at a time back in early 2000. I went from KTTS, and then we did the very first internet radio station, which was a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into the laptop computers, and it was, it's kind of strange to see how everything comes full circle, because back then, I think I made a kind of a prediction that eventually that our computers were going to fit in the palm of our hand, which now we have the smartphones. But
Right.
it was just always fun to be enterprising. My parents, I have a brother that's a chemist. My other brother was a computer sciences for the Burlington Northern Railroad. So I was the one that was kind of different. I always had these ideas that, you just have to kind of follow your passion and dreams sometimes. And they thought I was a little crazy. And I remember my dad said, nobody's going to buy these things off the internet. Who's going to do that? So when it really started going, it was really a great thing, because you just are in uncharted waters. But it's a lot of, the internet really does a lot of things that it gives you a platform that you can't have elsewhere sometimes.
I notice with all the quarantine activity because of the coronavirus, that the internet is very busy, so much so that it's actually on the slow side.
Yes, it is. I thought it was just me this morning.
No, it's there's so much traffic. In fact, my phone was it was about 15 minutes before it received a signal that we'd set our alarm system at our home, and usually it happens in a matter of seconds. But
It's
I've
just a
noticed
delay now.
the last few days it's been that way. Speaking of the quarantine and the coronavirus and so forth, in the news this morning, the governor of California has ordered all 40 million residents of California to stay in their homes. Now, who would ever have thought that we would come to that kind of day? Matthew Dillon Pearson, can you imagine 40 million? The whole state shut down. 40 million people told to stay home.
I, along with I'm sure a lot of people, due to like the movies we've watched in the past about post-apocalyptic type stuff, that's where our minds go immediately. I never thought that we would be a part of a pandemic like this. You never think it's going to happen to you. But in cases like in California, and eventually, you never know. I'm assuming now that eventually the whole entire country is going to have to go on lockdown.
Well, we watch and see and listen and learn. Renee, you having this background in broadcasting may find this interesting. and I was telling Nancy this yesterday. When I was born, where I was born, about 2 miles east of Moberly, Missouri, in a 3-room house, 3 rooms total.
Tell me how many people were in that
Well,
room house.
and no indoor plumbing at all. My mom carried water. There was I said 3 rooms and a path, path to the outhouse.
We had that in Clinton at my dad's, and I remember that when I was younger too.
My mom, my dad, my oldest brother Wilbur, my only sister Adelie, my brother Bob, my brother Bill, plus my cousin Clyde, my cousin Carl, my cousin Nellie. There were 9 people in that house. When I was born, I made number 10.
Oh my goodness.
And my dad walked the 2 miles to work and then home. And we had, they had, and me, of course I didn't know it, we had no radios,
No telephones?
no telephone. We had none of that. So my dad being born in 1899, I'm not sure that he even knew there was the flu epidemic of 1918. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're in a
Because
small area then.
there was no communication. Everybody was isolated. So now we have this communication, the internet, television, and everything else, radio, internet radio, shortwave radio, everything to keep us in touch so that we are aware that there is a pandemic. But I'm convinced that my dad, who was about 18, 19 years old at the time of the great influenza, probably didn't even know it happened. And yet it killed 50 million people.
Yes, it's a lot of people.
So communication, how do we leverage that for the good?
A lot of times we're leveraging it for the bad,
That's right. That's right.
and it's, at times like this, I think the media tends to factor in that fear factor. We tend to, make people a little mass hysteria sometimes. But with something like this, I think, it's great to have all these platforms of communication because we can keep people informed. We can give updates. We have, where you can have resources if you're having trouble with this, if you're sick, or to report. So I think having all of these different platforms, with the internet, with TV, with radio, it's good for things like this now.
With communication as it is now, it's a two-edged sword in a sense because now people know to stay home. And I visited with a restaurateur who was a guest on our show recently, and by text message is how we visited. And his restaurant is basically closed except for carry-out. And I think he may have said delivery, I'm not sure. But this really contracts down the serving staff. I mean, they're out on the end of a limb, and they are the serving staff in most restaurants. I don't know about his or whatever, but I understand they work for like 50% of minimum wage, and then their tips. So if you're not on the job to get the tips, you got a problem. So my thing is, communication has made it so we know to stay home, but the same communication that could be saving lives is also maybe costing the lives of businesses.
Oh yeah, it's and that's when things are serious. When we're told to stay home and we can't frequent or we can't gather more than 10 people at a time, we know that there's something very serious going on, and we need to heed those warnings and that advice because it's not to scare us, but it's for our own good and to to stop the spread of the virus. But I think it's been one of the great things about communication is seeing the communities come together to help the businesses, to help the individuals. So we're seeing that great American spirit at a time with the pandemic, and people are starting to help their neighbor, love their neighbors again.
Yes,
so I
yes.
think that's a good thing. We're becoming more grounded in ourselves again.
By the way, Acts Ministry, and see if I can make this clear for all of our viewers and listeners. some of you know it, but some of you may not have it fixed in your heads yet. Acts Ministry began officially in August of 1993. Unofficially, next month is when it first came to me, the idea of starting Acts Ministry. And Acts Ministry began Acts Media Group, which we are a part of with the internet radio and with internet television live streaming and our social media outreach, to the extent that the Acts Ministry is doing its best to use communication abilities for the best and the highest object in mind. Always serving where needed,
Yes.
and doing the right thing. So you can go to axmediagroup.com and you can check out a lot of really good things, good stuff. And at the same time, if you look around, you'll find a little button that says donate. And it would be wonderful if all those folks who are being blessed because of the programming that's going on with Acts Media Group would make a donation. And you can be well assured it goes for all the right causes. Did I leave anything out? Matthew, Dylan, Pearson?
Well, Dr. Paul, I do want to make sure that, and thank you, by the way, we are a worldwide ministry, and I would say that serving where needed is doing the right thing. And we also want to continue to grow and expand the programming that we have and that we bring to you, because people are looking for reliable news sources and everything, especially during these times where you can't trust the media. Just know, also send your prayer requests to us, axmediagroup.com. We have the Kidney Fund, Veterans Church, and many other programs that we're involved with in serving others. And we'd like for you guys to partner with us in doing so. So just go online to axmediagroup.com. As you're searching through all the really cool things we got on there, the Real News Review, which is an online newspaper. Right now, the first thing you'll see is a very good article written by Dr. James R. Wining, the president of Acts Ministry. And it's called Fear Over Faith, or Faith Over Fear. It's one of the two.
I think it's Faith Over Fear.
Faith Over Fear. And it's very informative, and just we'd like for you to help us out. We'd like to partner with you in continuing to grow. And we can't do that without people like you. So go online to that website. There's a little donate button there. You click on it. You can set up a one-time donation, or you can become a monthly partner with us and set up a monthly donation there just as well. It's easy. No donation too small, no donation too big. So I think that's about all I got to say about it at the moment. Back to you, Dr. Paul.
You did real good, Matt. I'm proud of you.
Me too, Matt. Good job.
I'd like to work in radio someday.
Anyway, when I get round to it, I'm going to write something for the Real News Review. The Real News Review used to be hard copy, and just before I stepped out or whatever.
Make sure you send it to the editor.
I did what?
Make sure you send it to the editor.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is you, right?
No, not anymore. Not anymore. I started the newspaper. It was a full-size newspaper, 12 pages with color, and it was called the Real News Review, Real News-Review, and it was an idea I'd had for 30-some years, and I finally got it done. We gave it away free, and thousands of copies in Branson and Springfield. If you couldn't get off an airplane in the Kansas City International Airport and go to a hotel without finding the Real News Review.
That's awesome.
And it was always all religion in the news. And we got it off the wire service from the University of Missouri at Columbia School of Journalism.
That's a great program.
And that's probably the best known, most highly regarded school of journalism in the world. Well, after a while, Dr. Wining saw the need to just move it to the internet, and so it isn't hard copy anymore. But many print media, they're beginning to look to the internet as a way to get their message out.
Yes, we're seeing a lot of the big corporations are downsizing. They're going online, but I'm still one of those people. I like to take the paper and I like to sit there and I like to read it. So I don't ever I think it would be hard to say if the newspapers are ever really going to go away, just like we were talking about TV earlier. I don't think those things are going to go away because those are staples that we've always had. And there are those people that still like to have the traditional newspaper. They like to have the TV. They don't like the smartphones.
No,
So
that's right.
it's interesting in the 50 years that I've been here to see
How many?
50.
I mean, kidding me.
Yes.
But on the one hand, I'm astounded that's 50 years. On the other hand, I have to say, you're just a kid.
And you're not kidding.
And I'm not kidding. Tell a friend.
Yes.
Nobody beats our deal. I know all those slogans. You can tell I watch television. What a place. Remember that one?
Yes.
And remember the one about where it's always sunshine and 65?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
wow,
okay.
that goes way back.
But having a guy like Nick Sibley on who writes commercials, sets them to music and all that sort of thing, does cause you to flash back. Some commercials stick with you.
Oh yes, that
Yeah.
little jingle in your head.
Yeah,
You can't get it
uh-huh.
out. Yeah.
Plop, plop, fizz, fizz.
Oh, what a relief it is.
There you go. There you go. And we know what that's for. Many a hangover has been helped. Anyway, speaking of newspapers, my hometown newspaper, I found out from one of my classmates, and yes, I still have some classmates who are alive. One of my classmates told me that the Moberly Monitor Index is down to like, Nancy, did she say 2 or 3 issues a week? I think it was 3 issues, maybe 2 issues. Used to be 5 days a week. And when my first job, I was 7 years old, and I delivered the Moberly Monitor Index to 140 some customers, 5 nights a week. I collected for the paper on Saturday mornings, made change. The
7 years old.
newspaper was 15 cents a week,
Oh wow.
and I was paid 25 cents a week.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's good money for a 7-year-old.
Well,
That would equate to about $5 a week in real time now.
There you go. And I really I was so good at it that my boss, the guy who owned the paper route, he was only like 6 years older than me, Roger Sparkman. We called him Runt. And he's down there south of Tulsa. Runt, if you're listening, you're not out of mind. I remember you. He raised me from 25 cents a week to 50 cents a week.
Because you were doing a good job then.
That's right. And then, after a while, I was really, now there's a lesson in this. Work, do the job at whatever level you start, and you will be rewarded. I went from 25 cents a week to 50 cents a week to $1.80 a week.
Oh wow.
Now, on that basis, I was able to save enough money that when Runt was ready to retire, I bought the newspaper route.
See,
And
you've always been an entrepreneur.
I kept that route until I was 14 years old. The last round I made, delivering half, I hired somebody. See, I only did half the route. I had 140 some papers. There was another 140 one another direction. I hired somebody to do that. Anyway, the last tour that I made to deliver the paper, I was riding a doodlebug. Now,
What's a doodlebug?
okay, good.
That was a
question.
nickname of mine.
I'm gl-
Where'd it come from?
I'm glad. Well, Nancy has a nickname, Doodle. I call her Doodle. I'm glad you asked me. And Matt Dylan Pearson is busy over there doing technical stuff, so he doesn't know this. But a doodlebug was a tiny motor scooter, and it was only about, watch this on TV, y'all, about that tall, and about yay long. And you squeezed the handle, and that stopped it. If you released the handle, it went. And you were supposed to be 16 to have something on the road. My paper route was so much, even though it was a lot of people, but put it this way. I remember when they dug trenches to put sewer in, so it was a neighborhood of outhouses. And instead of gravel streets, we had the railroad going by, and so they used cinders from the locomotives, from the, coal cinders for the streets. So my dad called, we knew the chief of police. He rode a motorcycle, and his name was Ugg Wynn. That was his nickname, Ugg. But his real name was Omar. And he was a great baseball catcher. He played baseball for the Moberly Merchants semi-pro team and was our police chief, rode a motorcycle. My dad called Ugg Wynn, and he called a state patrolman that he knew. Both of them said, well, Mr. Collins, boy's supposed to be 16, have a driver's license, but you just do what you think is best. My dad said, son, you can buy that. So I put myself in debt the first time in my life because I owned a business. Now, all of you listen to me. There's a lesson here. I went to a store and I contracted for the Doodlebug $2.50 a week payments.
For how many weeks?
A long time. A long time. I would go into downtown at Moberly. They taught us to do banking, to go to the city bank to put my paper out money in there. And then I had to go to the Monitor Index, write them a check for my cost of the papers. And then I had my profit. Then I had to go by the store and write a check for $2.50 for my Doodlebug that I couldn't even ride downtown. I could only ride it in our neighborhood.
Aww.
Take a lesson, folks. That's what business used to be like. If you're not careful, it's that way today. There's a whole lot of debt floating around.
Oh, yes. And we're seeing more with the internet, with technology and the way we can communicate now. Your entrepreneurs are getting younger and younger. So we have 7-year-olds, YouTubers, and they're testing products and they're getting major advertisers on your YouTube page. So you've got we're seeing the tides changing, and it's anyone can have an idea and have success at having a business.
Right. We need to get our act together concerning money. That's for sure. Matthew Dillon Pearson, I'd like to borrow you. I want you to come over here and sit next to Renee. Now, folks, we do this show. It is casual, and it is not canned. So it's casual. And I have a little thing that I think Dr. Whining really appreciated that I did one time. And for us to illustrate how money works, you have to play the game and don't try to get creative. I have a dollar bill here.
All right.
And when I show it, Renee says, Paul, you remember a couple of weeks ago you borrowed $2 from me? I could sure use my money. Say that.
Paul, you remember you borrowed a couple of dollars from me a couple of weeks ago? I could sure use the money.
Well, Renee, I don't have two. I have one. I'll give you one, and I'll owe you one. Matt, you say the same thing to her. Renee, remember a couple of weeks ago you borrowed a couple of dollars?
Hey, you remember a couple of weeks ago you borrowed a couple dollars?
Yeah.
I could really use my money.
Well, here you go.
There's one. Now, tell him you still owe him one.
Now, I still owe you one.
All right.
Nancy, don't get creative. Just play the game.
I just want my dollar.
No, you want your
$2. My $2 from you.
And you don't have.
All I've got's $1.
Well, it's better than nothing.
See, she's getting creative.
Okay.
Now you owe her
Very much.
one.
Now, this is the example of what not to do during the coronavirus outbreak. Anyways.
Okay, now, Nancy, you remember
Yes.
a couple of weeks ago I loaned you $2. I could sure use my money.
Well, all I've got's $1. I mean, if I give you my dollar,
Don't play the game. Now,
She is ornery today.
you still owe me $1. Ha! Renee? Paul, remember you still owe me $1?
Yes.
Okay, now, I don't owe you anything.
Okay, we're paid in full.
She still owes you $1.
All right.
Now, I don't owe you anything.
She's paid in full.
Matthew Dillon Pearson.
Yes, Miss
Remember,
Nancy. There, I don't owe you
That
anything.
dollar goes a long way.
Man,
Hey, hey,
oh,
hey, hey.
man.
Now you don't owe me anything. Everybody's paid, and who has the dollar?
You still have the dollar.
My brain just exploded, Dr. Paul.
Dr. Whining really likes this illustration. It's a great illustration about cash flow, people all getting paid, and the thing of
That's
it
the
is,
same dollar.
it's the same dollar, and the guy that had it still has it.
And your debt's paid.
And my debt's paid, your all are paid.
But of course, you had to loan the $2 to begin with.
I borrowed $2.
Oh.
Now you begin to learn a little bit about banking.
Now, when did you borrow the dollar to give her that
No,
money
I didn't.
back?
I borrowed $2.
$2.
I borrowed $2 from her a couple of weeks ago.
Oh.
And
Where'd you get that dollar?
that one, I found it in my wallet. I didn't know it was there. It was
Oh.
left over.
You've
from
thought about this,
it
haven't
was,
you?
It was left over from the $2 I borrowed. The other dollar, I blew it on something. I'm not going to say what. I blew it on something.
Probably dime novels or something like that.
I'm not going to say what I blew
But if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
There you go. Now you see?
That's good.
So now you've learned something. Now this is a lesson in money. Now the truth is, we could put this dollar right back here in the vault.
And save it for a rainy day.
Just put it in the vault,
Until someone borrows it from you again.
and then we could just pretend that I have a dollar, and she could pretend that it's real, and I could hand her the pretend dollar, and we could send this pretend dollar all the way around, and I still have the pretend dollar. So money isn't real.
No, it's an idea.
All right, rest my case. So there's more to this money thing than meets the eye. Aren't you glad you met up with me today?
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. I'm just sitting here thinking about who I owe money to,
And cash flow.
and then I'm going to borrow $2 and do that enough times. I can say 100, do it 100 times,
And remember, this wisdom
and
came
you'll
from
still get $1.
this wisdom came from someone that you don't want to write off too soon. Folks, I admit, come June, I love it. I'm going to be 85.
Oh,
I can
goodness.
hardly wait for 90 just to show these young upstarts that there's still a little bit of something clicking in some of these brains, you know? And to think my first job paid 25 cents a week, and from all of that, I learned this. So don't go in debt for a doodle bug.
I got called a doodle bug because I would write all over my tests in school. So
Well, I took up calling Nancy Doodle years ago, and some of our friends, it stuck. They still call her Doodle. You all want to know a little bit more about money? Remember, I had an illustration. I don't bring it out now, but a dollar bill is about that thick, you know, not very thick. And it takes a stack of those 4 inches high, of $1,000 bills, 4 inches high, to be $1 million. But it takes back in 2008, when our national debt was a mere $8 trillion, it took a stack of $1,000 bills, 67 miles high, to
Oh,
equal
wow.
that debt. Now the national debt, the government debt, is 23 trillion, which is approximately 4 times more. So 4 times 70, you know, you're looking at
280.
280 million. Trillion.
dollars. You know, look how high it would be, 2,800 miles or something or other, of $1,000 bills. That tells you the value of money. So that little game, it's a good game. It's a good one. Feel free to use it.
thank you,
And-
Dr. Paul.
As long as you give me credit, if you collect any royalties,
Well, I thought that's what this was all about in the first place.
if you collect any royalties,
Or interest.
I want my 25 cents. Okay, let's get back here to our special guest, Renee. Renee Goodwin. I have to tell you, Renee, I was sitting here looking across the table at you a while ago, and I remembered you look, other than the fact that you're not Caucasian, you look exactly like one of the best friends I ever had in my whole life. We were in junior high together, in high school together, junior college together. We worked together. She was the bookkeeper in the locker plant, and I was the meat cutter. And a year and a half ago, I had the privilege of preaching her funeral. Betty Ona Ellsbury, who became Betty Ona Coons, and her two children, I send them texts every now and then, encouraging them and so forth. But you could be Betty Ona Ellsbury's twin, except
I got a 10.
you got a tan. Yeah. But she had eyes, brown eyes like yours. I mean, it's uncanny. A while ago I was thinking,
I got a doppelganger.
how about that? So, she was such a special person to me. We were good friends, and we'd get together, and I'd pick her up in my 41 Ford business coupe, and we'd take a car ride at night, and we were never boyfriend and girlfriend in that sense. We were just good friends, and she'd tell me about whoever she was dating, and I'd tell her about who I was dating, and we'd share with each other and complain and carry on. You know, she was such a dear, dear friend. In the years that you've been in Springfield, other than your broadcast work and your work with laptops and so forth, what's been your preoccupation? Not your occupation, preoccupation.
Preoccupation, probably activism.
And you come at things a little differently as a community activist than any I've ever known, especially in the minority community.
Oh, yeah.
I have a sense that your activism is not dependent upon a minority status. Sometime we have to have you on the broadcast where we can really talk about your interest in social justice, for instance. We don't have enough people who are really concerned about social justice issues, and maybe it's because if I don't get close, it won't bite me. You know, that kind of an approach. And it takes a little courage to be involved in social justice issues.
Definitely.
Nancy and I, a number of years ago, as a part of Acts Ministry, when we were in charge of things then, we began a prison ministry, and it was primarily because Nancy was concerned. She saw this movie, The Catholic Nun Who Ministered to the Man.
Dead Man Walking. That was
Dead
a great
Man
movie.
Walking, yeah.
Yes. Susan Sarandon. Yes.
Nancy was so impressed that she impressed me, and then the next thing I know, we have this prison ministry. And so we visited, we visited maybe three prisons, and I visited a prison camp. But we used to go over to what we called old JCCC, Jefferson City Correctional Center.
Yep.
And it was the oldest maximum security prison west of the Mississippi. And we would take a group with us. And as a person who was involved with the news, you may find this interesting. I set it up with the chaplain at JCCC to have microphones set up in the chapel so that the inmates could come up to the microphone and ask questions. I had a panel that would answer questions. One was retired Deputy Chief of Police of Kansas City.
Oh, wow.
And his wife, who was a Methodist pastor. I had a variety of people like that. Plus, I had a newspaper reporter from Springburg, USA. And it was a great program to hear the questions that inmates had for folks who were living on the outside. And in a matter of 2 days, I had a notice not to ever bring a newspaper reporter back to JCCC. When the director of the Department of Corrections read the newspaper and saw the article written, she informed, we used to call him warden, now they call him something else, director or something. of JCCC, don't let this happen again. So I got a word, don't let this happen again. But we went back some more times and just held church services.
Oh, I'll tell you.
We had it was great.
I bet. And, you know, a lot of times, the one thing that gets a lot of those prisoners through is their faith. And a lot of times they haven't had to deal with faith. They just get out in the world and they make choices that are worldly, and they end up behind bars, and they don't get in touch with God until they've gone through something. And a lot of people don't get in touch with God until you've really gone through something almost traumatic. But to see a lot of people turn their lives around when they're in prison. And I know it's hard, you know, they have a stigma when they come out, but there's a lot of programs now for people to help so we don't have as much recidivism
Right,
when
and
they
that's
come
been
back
a
out.
big problem in the past.
Yes, definitely.
Recidivism, folks, for those of you who don't understand that, that means a man or woman comes out of incarceration, and after a period of time, for one reason or another, they go back in to incarceration. We have a ministry group connected with us in fellowship that has evolved to be a place where former inmates can come and get reestablished, and Bible study and faith is the anchor.
Yes.
And it's Renee. People have a tendency to forget over the years, or maybe generationally the word isn't passed along. But the most successful drug treatment rehabilitation program was and still is Teen Challenge.
Oh, yes, yes.
And Teen Challenge is not just for teens, and it's not just for males. They have males and females of all ages. But it was started. There was a book written and a movie made called The Cross and the Switchblade, and Pat Boone. Again, some of you are maybe so young you don't remember Love Letters in the Sand, but I do. Pat Boone, great crooner. Fact is, he sold more records than Elvis Presley. And Pat Boone was married to Red Foley's daughter, and Red Foley was in charge of the Ozark Jubilee here in Springburg, USA. But Pat Boone played the part of David Wilkerson, who was a real person, founded a church in Times Square, New York, and still there. And David Wilkerson was killed in an auto accident in East Texas about 5 or 6 years ago. He wrote the book, The Cross and the Switchblade. And Teen Challenge came out of, it was his experience. He started that. Now it's well known and yet still a well-kept secret that people with addiction, not only drugs but alcohol addiction, Teen Challenge has probably been responsible to cut back on recidivism. Without Teen Challenge, there's no telling how it would have gone.
Right, and it's that rehabilitation aspect. A lot of times we're so focused on punishment instead of rehabilitating.
That's right.
Why did you make these choices? How did you get here? What led to your drug abuse? And a lot of times with people that, you know, use drugs, the majority of your people that are incarcerated, it has a drug offense, or drugs led up to them committing a violent crime. But we haven't ever gotten to where they're dealing with the pain that caused them to become users and abusers of drugs.
That's right. And when I was teaching at the local community college here, either in a philosophy class or an ethics class or a psychology class, once in a while we would get off onto the topic of the criminal justice system, especially in the ethics class. And I would ask my students, where do criminals come from? Do you go out and raise up a rock and they're under the rock? Do they grow on trees? Where do they come from? And then I would answer the question. They come from us. We are the community. We produce the criminals. Now, some folks don't like to think about that because they say, well, so-and-so had a choice, he made a choice, or she made a choice. Yes, but still, we're a long ways from the day when the church on the corner had a lot of influence.
Yes.
And sadly, we're trying to find some ways to fill in the gaps now.
Yes.
And that's why Acts Ministry serves where needed. And by doing the right thing. Somebody has to do something. See, Renee, as an example of Acts Ministry and its concern, I told our doctor, our primary care physician on this broadcast last week, years ago I was the chairman of the Greene County Kidney Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist anymore. The only organization similar is in St. Louis, the only one in the state. Kidneys are not a glamour disease. We have the Cancer Society, Heart Association, etc., Alzheimer's, all that. We don't hear enough about people who have kidney problems. Acts Ministry had a dinner at High Street Baptist Church, and we did some other things too to raise money for a man to have a kidney transplant. He had been on dialysis 11 years,
Oh, wow.
which is unheard of. The struggle isn't over. He had the transplant, and he's still struggling. But Acts Ministry is still there with financial help and with encouragement. And, as Matt mentioned, prayer requests. We take that very seriously.
Oh, yes.
Prayer is more powerful than money. I'm sorry, but it is.
It is.
If
It's the
gen-
truth.
if it's genuine prayer, that's my opinion. That's my opinion, and you don't have to take it to the bank. But you could.
Yes, you
So
could.
we have a multitude, a plethora of social concerns, and the criminal justice thing is one that's sadly neglected.
Yes, it's very, very neglected. And, you know, during times like this, and we're seeing because of the coronavirus, they're starting to let a lot of those offenders that have been in jail, in local jails, I don't know if they're moving so much for prison yet, but they're letting a lot of them out because the conditions are so bad, the overcrowding is so bad, and it's, you know, we're talking Sheriff Arnott's building a new jail here. We don't want a new jail. We want to make it to where we're not putting so many people behind bars.
Yeah.
But it becomes a thing where it's corrections is driven on money. Money's
Sure.
the root of all evil. But
That's right.
instead of, you know, bragging about building a bigger jail, we need to cut down on the people that we're sending to jail. We need to get to the heart of the matter with the problems.
That's exactly right. We just a few years ago, we built a new jail, county jail. We're talking about. For those of you in Germany, we're talking about Greene County, Missouri, in which we find Springburg, USA, and we're in the southwest quadrant of the state of Missouri, which is in the middle of the United States, which means we're the middle of the world.
That's why we're the Queen City.
So now they're talking about building another jail, even bigger, and I guess we probably will do it. But I remember when building prisons in Missouri was a surefire way to for a politician to get elected or reelected, because the promise of bringing jobs in the community. There was a movie, I think Tom Cruise was in it, and there were 3 words that I used with my ethics class, that if you wanted to get to the root cause of something, 3 words: follow the money.
Follow the money.
And I think that was Tom Cruise. He said, show me the money. Show me the money. 4 words. Well, that's close. Yes, Matthew.
We are out of time, Dr.
Oh, my.
Oh,
Well,
it went by so fast. I was
tell
having
you
so much
what.
fun.
Instead of a slow close, let me just say this. Renee Goodwin is a delight. If any of you have an opportunity to have her on a show someplace, you better have this girl. And
Thank
we're going to
you.
have her back. We have a lot to talk
I'd love
about.
to come back here.
And in the meantime, next week, our guest will be Greg Burris, former administrator at Missouri State University, former city manager of Springburg, USA, currently the head of the United Way, and we're looking forward to seeing him. Friday will come around again next week, unless the world stops in the meantime. Until then, old Dr. Paul, sweet little Miss Nancy, and our wonderful friend Renee Goodwin, wishing you the very best. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay blessed. Bye-bye until next
Bye-bye.
Friday.